The suitcases were in the entryway when Renata got home, and for a moment she stood in the open doorway and looked at them the way you look at something that does not belong in the frame, something your brain keeps trying to correct for, keeps insisting is wrong, even as your eyes confirm it is very much there. Two suitcases. Large ones, the hardshell kind with the spinning wheels. One was burgundy. The other was gray with a floral wrap that Renata recognized, had seen before in photographs, had seen in the background of the video call 3 Christmases ago when Preston held the phone up so she could wave at his family across the screen. She recognized the suitcases before she recognized anything else. Then she looked up. Claudette Holt was standing in the living room of the apartment that Renata had spent 2 years making into a home. She was wearing a cream blouse and pressed trousers and low heels that barely made a sound on the floors Renata had chosen, the wide plank oak that she had saved for across 18 months of freelance projects before she and Preston moved in together. Claudette had the posture of a woman who had never questioned whether she was welcome somewhere. She was standing near the bookshelf, looking at a small ceramic piece Renata had bought at an art market in Asheville, turning it slightly in her hands. She set it down when Renata came in. "There she is," Claudette said. She smiled the way she always smiled, wide and soft and slightly too warm, the way a person smiles when they are performing warmth rather than feeling it. "We thought you would be another hour at least." "Wait." Renata heard footsteps coming from the hallway. Preston appeared carrying the burgundy suitcase toward the guest room. He was in his work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, which meant he had come straight from the bank, which meant he had known about this, had left work early to be here, had not called her. "Hey," he said, stopping when he saw her face. "I was going to explain when you got home." "Explain what?" Renata said. Mom had an issue with her flight situation. The connection she had to Diane's was canceled, and rebooking would have put her there on Sunday, which is the day after, so it made more sense to just have her stay here for the few days before. Renata looked at him. 4 days, she said. 4 days, he said. He was nodding in the way he nodded when he wanted her to see that it was reasonable, that she was the one making it bigger than it needed to be. "It's not a big deal, Ren. It's 4 days before our wedding. It'll be fine." Claudette had drifted toward the kitchen in the way she had of moving through a room, easy and proprietorial, like she was already learning the geography of the place. "I told him not to fuss," she said from the kitchen. "I don't need much. I just need a bed and a coffee maker and I'll stay out of everyone's way." Renata took a breath. She put her bag down on the console table by the door. She hung up her coat. She went to the kitchen and filled a glass with water and drank half of it standing at the sink. Preston followed her. He stood in the kitchen doorway. "Are you okay?" he said. "I had a final fitting today," she said. "Then I came home." "I know, I'm sorry I didn't call. It happened fast." "Things that happen fast," Renata said, "you call about." He looked at her for a moment. He had blue eyes that she had loved for 3 years, the way they went soft when he was thinking about something he cared about. Right now, they had the particular quality she had learned to recognize over those same 3 years. The quality of a man who believed that if he waited long enough, the discomfort would pass without him having to address it. "She's my mother," he said. "She came all the way from Connecticut." Renata set her glass down. "I know who she is, Preston." She went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes with the door closed. She was not crying. She was doing the thing she did when something landed wrong, the thing her mother had taught her without meaning to, just by example. She was sitting with it instead of running her mouth at it. She was letting herself feel the specific shape of what had just happened. It was not just the suitcases. It was not just the 4 days. It was the way Preston had been carrying that bag to the guest room like it was an ordinary Tuesday. Like he had made a decision that affected their home and their last 4 days before becoming a married couple, and he had not thought to include her in it at all. It was the ceramic piece in Claudette's hands. It was the we. Renata had been engaged to Preston Holt for 14 months. In those 14 months she had met Claudette 7 times. Each time had been pleasant and slightly uncomfortable in a way Renata could never quite name, the kind of discomfort that lives just below the surface of a thing, below the part you can point to. Claudette brought gifts that were always a little off, pretty things that did not match what Renata actually liked, but matched what Claudette thought someone like Renata should like. She asked questions about Renata's work that were technically interested, but had an undertone of something else, something assessing. Preston always said his mother was just particular. He said it the way people say things they have been saying for 20 years without thinking about them anymore. Renata sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall. 4 days. She could do 4 days. She had done harder things. She had built a business from a single contract and a rented desk. She had managed difficult clients and complicated timelines and materials that came in wrong and contractors who came in late. 4 days was nothing. She told herself that and stood up and went back out to be a good host in her own home. Claudette was looking at the bookshelf again when Renata came out. She turned and smiled. "You have wonderful taste," she said. "Preston said you designed this whole apartment yourself." "I did," Renata said. "You must be very talented." Claudette tilted her head slightly. "I always thought this building was a little noisy for such a central location, but I suppose it's different when it's yours." Preston came back down the hallway. He was smiling in the relieved way he smiled when two people he loved were in the same room and not visibly fighting. "Who's hungry?" he said. "I thought we could order from that Italian place." Claudette said she had been thinking about pasta all day. Renata said that sounded fine. She sat at the table she had chosen and ate the food she had not ordered and listened to Claudette tell a story about a cousin's wedding in Savannah, and she watched Preston laugh at the right moments, and she thought about the suitcases still sitting in the entryway, and she thought about the 4 days ahead, and she thought about the feeling she had been sitting with in the bedroom. She was not nervous about marrying Preston. She was not sure anymore that what she was feeling was nerves at all. She filed that thought away and poured herself more water and smiled at her fiancé across the table. She was very good at being composed. She had learned over the course of her life that composure was not the same as acceptance. You could hold your face still and keep your mind very, very clear. She was keeping her mind very clear. The kitchen was the first thing. Renata came out the morning after Claudette arrived to find the spice rack reorganized. She had kept her spices alphabetically because that was how she cooked, how she thought, how she moved through a recipe without stopping. Claudette had arranged them by color. It was a small thing. Renata put them back after breakfast and said nothing about it. The florist was the second thing. She found out on the second day when her florist, a woman named Bev who had been doing her arrangements for 2 years, called to ask a question about the delivery time. Bev mentioned, carefully, that someone had called the previous afternoon about adjusting the centerpiece order. "Adjusting how?" Renata said. "The garden roses you had selected were changed to white hydrangeas," Bev said. "I thought maybe you had changed your mind, but I wanted to confirm before we pulled the order." Renata had not changed her mind. She had thought about those garden roses for 6 months. She confirmed the original order, apologized for the confusion, and went to find Claudette. Claudette was in the living room with a cup of tea, reading. "Did you call the florist?" Renata said. Claudette looked up. She did not look guilty. She looked like a woman who had done something reasonable. "I did. I hope you don't mind. I've always felt white hydrangeas photograph better for weddings. The garden roses can look a little heavy in pictures." "I chose the roses," Renata said. "Of course you did, and they're lovely. I just thought you might appreciate the input," she smiled. "But it's your wedding, whatever you want." Renata went back to the kitchen. She told Preston that evening. He listened with the expression he had when he was deciding how to say something he had already decided to say. "She was just trying to help," he said. "She called my florist without asking me. She's been doing weddings her whole life. Her sister got married twice and she organized both of them. She just gets excited." "Preston." "Ren, it's the florist. The roses are still happening. Everything is fine." She looked at him for a long moment. He was not wrong, technically. The roses were still happening. Everything was technically fine. But she had watched him say his mother was just trying to help, and she had watched him say his mother gets excited, and she had watched him explain each individual thing without ever seeing the pattern underneath the individual things, and that was the part that stayed with her. She called Noel from the bathroom at 10 that night. Noel Abrams had been her best friend since their first week at design school, when they had ended up at the same orientation table and argued so enthusiastically about a building in Chicago that the professor had stopped to listen. He was her business partner now, the one who handled the client calls and the billing while she handled the spaces. He had met Preston twice and had been polite and had not said what he thought, which Renata had appreciated. "She reorganized my spice rack," Renata said. "She called the florist." "What did Preston say?" "She was just trying to help." There was a pause. "Renata," Noel said. "I know. I'm not going to say it." "You don't have to." She sat on the edge of the tub. "I just needed to tell someone who would hear it correctly." "I hear it correctly," he said. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to get married in 4 days," she said. "And then Claudette goes to Diane's in Savannah, and it's just me and Preston, and things go back to how they were." "Okay," Noel said. He did not say anything else about it. She called her mother the next morning. Dottie Cole lived in Baltimore in the house where Renata had grown up, in a neighborhood with wide streets and big trees and neighbors who had been there 30 years. She answered on the second ring the way she always did, and she listened the way she always listened, which was completely, without filling the silences. When Renata finished, Dottie was quiet for a moment. "Baby," she said, "I want to ask you something and I want you to think before you answer." "Okay." "When something goes wrong in that house," Dottie said, "does Preston handle it or does he explain it?" Renata sat with that. "He explains it," she said. "And has that always been the case, or is that new?" It was not new. She had always known it, had always put it in the column of things that were not perfect but were workable, the column of things she could live with because the other columns were so good. Preston was kind. He was steady in most things. He made her laugh. He was proud of her work in the way men sometimes forgot to be proud of the women they were with. She had put the explaining in the workable column. "I hear you, Mama," she said. "I'm not telling you what to do," Dottie said. "You're a grown woman who has always known her own mind. I'm just asking you to make sure you're seeing it clearly." "I am," Renata said. She believed it when she said it. The caterer issue happened on the 3rd day. Claudette had called to change the head count at the welcome table, citing a conversation with Preston that Preston, when Renata asked him, said had been a casual mention, not an instruction. Renata called the caterer herself and corrected the count. The caterer was professional about it and slightly confused. That evening, Renata sat in the living room while Claudette watched something on television and Preston read. And she looked at the two of them in the comfortable arrangement of people who had been in rooms together for a long time. And she thought about what it meant that she had been living with Preston for 2 years and still felt, in this moment, like the person who had just arrived. Claudette looked over. "You look tired, Renata. You should get your rest. Brides always underestimate how much the last few days take out of you." "I'm fine," Renata said. "Of course you are," Claudette smiled. "I'm just saying it's a big day coming." Preston looked up from his book. He glanced between them. He went back to his book. Renata looked at the wall. She looked at the bookshelf with the ceramic piece she had bought in Asheville. She looked at her own living room, every piece of it chosen with care, every corner considered. She felt in that moment like a guest in a room she had designed. The rehearsal dinner was at a restaurant Preston had chosen, a warm, wood-paneled place in the city that did seasonal American food and had good lighting for photographs. It seated 40. There were 32 people at the tables when Renata arrived with her mother, which was the first time she noticed that the seating arrangement had been adjusted from the one she and Preston had submitted 2 weeks ago. She was at the main table, of course. But Dottie, who had been placed beside Renata in the original plan, was now 2 seats down, and Claudette was beside Renata's seat. Renata looked at the placard, she picked it up, she put it back down. She did not say anything about it. Dottie looked at the arrangement and then looked at Renata and did not say anything either. She sat where she had been placed and smoothed her napkin across her lap and began talking to the aunt on her left, as if the whole thing was exactly what she had expected. The dinner was good. The food was good. The speeches were kind and generous, the way rehearsal dinner speeches tended to be, everyone on their best behavior with the photographs happening and the real day coming. And then Claudette stood up. She had not been on the speaker list. Renata knew this because Renata had made the speaker list. But the microphone was passed to Claudette and Preston looked mildly surprised and did not say no, which meant it was happening. Claudette held the microphone with the ease of someone who had spoken in public before and knew how to perform graciousness. "I want to say a few words about my son," she said. "Preston has always been someone who leads with his heart, always. Even as a little boy he would come home with stray cats and injured birds and once memorably a neighbor's rabbit that had gotten loose." There was laughter. She smiled and let it settle. "He has always been someone who takes care of people, and I think it takes a particular kind of woman to be with a man like that, a patient woman. A woman who understands that when you love someone who gives as much as Preston gives, you are always going to be sharing him a little." She paused. "I hope Renata is ready for that. I hope she understands what she's signing up for." She raised her glass. "To Preston and Renata," she said, "may they find their way together." People raised their glasses. People said the words. The moment moved on the way moments at dinners moved on to the next thing, the next laugh, the next bite of food. Renata raised her glass. She smiled. She looked across the table and found Sandra Holt, Preston's younger sister, who was looking at her with an expression that was not quite an apology and not quite a warning. It was the expression of someone who had something to say and had decided, a long time ago, that saying it was not worth the cost. Sandra looked down at her plate. Renata looked at Preston. He was talking to his uncle on his right. He had not caught her eye during the toast. He was smiling. She thought about what Dottie had asked her. When something goes wrong, does he handle it or does he explain it? She thought about the spice rack and the florist and the caterer and the seating arrangement and the toast that had just told 32 people, in language soft enough to be denied, that Renata should understand she would always come second. She thought about the fact that Preston had not said anything. Not to his mother when she moved in without asking. Not to his mother when she called the florist. Not to his mother when she called the caterer. Not to his mother when she rearranged the seating. Not to his mother when she stood up at the rehearsal dinner and gave a toast that was not on the speaker list. He had not said anything because he did not see it as something that required saying something. That was the part. That was the thing she had been sitting with for 4 days, the thing she had been putting in the workable column, the thing she had been telling herself she could manage. It was not about Claudette. It had never been about Claudette. Claudette was who she was, and Claudette was not changing. People like Claudette did not change because they did not believe they need to. But Preston was the one who had moved the suitcases into the guest room. Preston was the one who had said she was just trying to help. Preston was the one sitting across the table right now, smiling at his uncle, while his mother's words were still in the air. Renata set her glass down. She finished her dinner. She talked to people. She thanked the restaurant manager. She hugged Preston at the end of the night in the parking lot in front of everyone who was watching, because tomorrow was their wedding day and people expected that. She told him she would see him at the venue. She drove to her mother's house, which was where she was staying the night before, because tradition or something adjacent to it. Dottie was already home when Renata arrived. She had the lights on in the kitchen and the kettle going. She looked at Renata when she came through the door and did not say anything at all, just handed her a mug and sat down across from her at the table. They sat together for a long time. "Mama," Renata said finally, "what do I do?" Dottie wrapped both hands around her own mug. "You already know," she said. "I've been planning this wedding for 14 months. I know you have. I love him. I know that too." Renata pressed her lips together. She looked at the table. "It's not just the 4 days, is it?" "No," Dottie said gently, "it isn't." The kitchen was quiet. The kettle had long since finished. The neighborhood outside was the way it always was at this hour, the particular stillness of a Tuesday night in a city that was not done for the day but was no longer loud. Renata sat in the house she had grown up in and held her mug, and looked at the woman who had always told her the truth even when the truth was inconvenient. And she sat with the thing she had known, somewhere below the word column she had been keeping, for longer than 4 days. She sat with it all the way to morning. She got dressed. That was not a small thing. She had thought the night before that she might not be able to get dressed, that the weight of what she was considering would make the getting dressed feel wrong, would make her hands shake when she reached for the hanger. But her hands did not shake. She got up at 6 and showered and sat in front of the mirror in her mother's bathroom and did her own makeup the way she had practiced, clean and precise, and when she put on the dress, she looked at herself for a long time. She was beautiful. She had always known this in the quiet way a woman knows it when she has never needed it to be the most important thing about her. The dress was ivory with a structured bodice and a full skirt, and she had chosen it because it made her feel like herself, not like a version of herself designed for other people to admire. She looked at her reflection and thought, "I made a good choice about the dress." Then she sat down on the edge of the bed and called Preston. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey," he said. His voice was light and a little rushed. "You're not supposed to call, remember. Bad luck." "I need to tell you something," she said. A pause. "Okay," he said. His voice had shifted. "I'm not coming today." Silence. "What?" "I'm not coming to the wedding." She kept her voice even. She had practiced this, not the words specifically, but the evenness. She needed to be clear and she needed to be calm and she did not need to be cruel. "I need you to hear me, Preston. I am not saying this because I'm nervous. I'm saying it because I have been watching something happen for 4 days and I've been trying to decide whether it was something I could live with, and I have decided that it isn't." "Renata," his voice was strained now. "What are you talking about if this is about my mother?" "It's about you," she said. That stopped him. "Your mother came into our home 4 days before our wedding without being invited and without anyone asking me. She changed my flower order. She changed the caterer's head count. She moved the seating at the rehearsal dinner. She gave a toast that was not on the speaker list in front of everyone who matters to me, and she told them all that I should be prepared to always come second. And you did not say one word, not once. Not to protect me, not to set a limit, not to make it clear to her that she was crossing lines in a house that belonged to both of us. She wasn't trying to." "Preston," her voice was quiet. "I know she wasn't trying to, that's not the point. The point is that you watched it happen and you explained it every time. And I have to ask myself what that means for the next 10 years, the next 20, when we have children, when we buy a house, when we have decisions to make that are ours and not hers." She heard him breathing. "I love you," he said. "I love you and I want to marry you." "I know," she said, and she meant it. That part was true, and it was also not enough. So come and we'll talk about all of this after. We'll set limits with my mother. I hear you, I do, just come today. Renata looked at her reflection in the mirror on the back of the bedroom door. The dress, the makeup, the woman she was who had built something real from nothing and who had never, in the building of it, accepted a foundation that was not sound. I can't build a marriage on a foundation where I will always be explaining myself, she said. I'm sorry, Preston. I am genuinely sorry, but I can't come today. She ended the call. She sat on the edge of the bed in her wedding dress in her mother's house. The phone buzzed twice more. She turned it face down. Dottie appeared in the doorway. She had been downstairs. She must have heard or known because she did not look surprised. She looked the way she always looked when Renata was going through something hard, steady and present and completely sure of her daughter. Okay, Dottie said. Okay, Renata said. The venue called at 9:45 to confirm arrival time. Dottie answered it. Renata did not hear what she said. She was sitting in the kitchen by then with the dress still on, because she could not quite bring herself to take it off yet, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold, and the particular feeling of a woman who has done something that will cost her considerably and knows it was still the right thing to do. She would let herself grieve all of it later. The plans and the flowers and the dress and the version of the future she had been holding in her mind for 14 months. She would let herself grieve it properly. But first she was going to sit in this kitchen and drink this cold coffee and be completely certain of the decision she had made. She was certain. That was enough. The weeks after were the kind that had no good structure. They arrived one at a time and did not arrange themselves into anything easy to hold on to. Preston called every day for the first week. She answered on the third day and the fourth and let the others go to voicemail. The conversations were versions of the same one. He understood now he had spoken to his mother. Things would be different. She had to know he had not meant for any of it to happen the way it did. She listened. She was not cold. She was simply clear in the way she had been on the phone that morning in the dress, and the clarity had not changed. The engagement was finished. She said it to him directly on the fifth day when he asked if they could take a break instead of ending it. She said, "There is nothing to take a break from. The decision has been made. I'm not angry at you. I wish you well. I need you to stop calling after this week." He was quiet for a long time. "My mother is going back to Connecticut," he said. "She left yesterday." "I know," Renata said. Sandra had texted her 3 words that morning. She went home. That was all. Renata had replied with a thank you and nothing else. "So then what?" Preston said. "I just lose everything because she overstepped." Renata sat with that for a moment. She thought about how to say what she needed to say without making it cruel. "She overstepped," Renata said carefully, "and you let her, every time. That's what I couldn't stay for." He did not answer. "I'm sorry, Preston," she said. "Take care of yourself." She did not answer his calls after that. The apartment was the next thing. The lease on the apartment they had shared was in both their names, with 8 months remaining. Preston was still living there. Renata had moved into Dottie's house temporarily, sleeping in her old room with the faded blue walls and the shelf of design textbooks she had never taken to college and never taken away. It was not a bad place to be, as places went. Dottie was good company and did not hover, but it was not sustainable. And then the pressure started. It came through small channels, the way pressure tends to. A mutual friend mentioned that Preston's family had concerns about the timeline of Renata's exit from the lease. A woman from their shared social circle, someone Renata had never been close to but had been cordial with, mentioned at a gathering that Preston was really struggling, and wasn't it a shame how things had happened. Renata smiled and said she wished him well and exited the conversation. She did not know where the next thing came from. She suspected later that she knew exactly where it came from, but she could not prove it then. A letter arrived from a property management company affiliated with the building, citing a lease agreement concern and requesting documentation of Renata's residential status going back 6 months. It was the kind of letter that was not quite threatening, but was designed to create worry, to make the recipient feel they had done something wrong. Renata read it twice. She set it on the kitchen table in Dottie's house. She picked up her phone and called Harriet Acaffer. She had gotten Harriet's name from a colleague whose firm had used her in a property dispute 2 years prior. Harriet was a real estate attorney who also took cases involving professional licensing and business interference. She had an office in Mount Vernon with a waiting room that was very calm and a manner that was even calmer. Renata had met her once before, briefly, at a professional event. She remembered Harriet as someone who listened with her whole attention. "Tell me everything," Harriet said, when Renata sat down across from her. Renata did, all of it. The engagement, the 4 days, the decision, the apartment, the letter. Harriet took notes and did not react visibly to any of it. "The lease concern letter is not legally binding," she said when Renata finished. "It is designed to make you feel you need to act quickly and possibly cede your position. You don't. Your name is on that lease equally, and you are entitled to your share of rights under it." "I don't want to live there," Renata said. "I want to get out cleanly." "We can negotiate an early exit," Harriet said, "with a reasonable fee and documentation. Preston will have to agree, but he will agree, because the alternative is a contested lease dispute that costs him considerably more." "Good," Renata said. "Is there anything else?" Harriet said. She was looking at Renata in the way she had at the event, with her whole attention. "Not yet," Renata said. She meant it as a straightforward answer. She did not know, when she said it, how quickly the not yet would arrive. Cole Design Studio had 3 active projects when Renata's personal life came apart, and she had worked on all 3 through the worst of it, because the work had always been the place where things made sense. Noelle had held everything together in the weeks when Renata was at her mother's house, fielding client emails and rescheduling 2 site visits, and managing a minor billing dispute with a contractor without telling her until it was resolved. When she came back to full capacity, she found the studio in better shape than she had left it, which was a specific kind of relief. "You didn't have to cover all of that," she told him. "You'd have done it for me," he said. She had transferred full ownership of a 25% stake in the studio to him 2 weeks later. She had been thinking about it for a year. She stopped thinking and did it. The studio was in a converted industrial space in a neighborhood that had been changing for a decade and was still mid-change, which meant the rent was reasonable and the light was exceptional. Renata had done the build-out herself, which was to say she had designed every inch of it and supervised the execution, and touched the walls when they were fresh to make sure the texture was right. It was her favorite space in the world. She was in that space, working on a residential project, when the notification came. An email from the city's Office of Business Licensing. A complaint had been filed regarding Cole Design Studio and a project completed 7 months prior. The complaint alleged financial irregularities in the billing documentation for a commercial renovation on the East Side. It requested a full audit of the project's financial records. Renata read it 3 times. She had no financial irregularities. The project had been clean, documented at every stage, signed off by the client, submitted on time. She knew every invoice in that file. She forwarded it to Harriet without adding a word. Harriet called within the hour. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Who outside your firm would have had access to your financial project files for that period?" Renata sat back in her chair. "Preston," she said slowly. "He helped me set up the accounting software 2 years ago. He still had login credentials. I hadn't removed his access because it hadn't occurred to me that there was a reason to." "Remove his access today," Harriet said. "Right now, before this call is over." Renata pulled up the software on her second screen and removed Preston's credentials while Harriet was still on the line. "Done," she said. "Good. Now, the complaint is anonymous in filing, but the city has a process for identifying the filer in the event of a counter-complaint. I'd like to pursue that. Do I have your permission?" "You have my permission," Renata said. She did not call Preston. She did not text him. She did not ask Harriet to contact him. She gave Harriet everything she had and went back to work on the residential project because the client was counting on her and because the work was the one place where nobody got to decide anything except her. Noel knew something was happening. He always knew, which was part of what made him useful and also sometimes annoying. He did not ask. He just made sure there was coffee in the carafe at 4 o'clock when she was usually running low, and he rerouted 2 client calls that she would have handled but that he could handle just as well. The referral from Elliot Vance came in 3 days later. It was a small project, a home office renovation for a client of his who was a financial consultant and worked from home and needed the space to function better. Elliot had sent the referral with a short note. "I've seen your firm's work on the Claremont project, and I think you're the right fit. The client has a specific vision but is reasonable about execution. Let me know if you have capacity." Renata checked the name. Elliot Vance, architect. She had seen his firm's work. He was good. The referral was thoughtful, specific, not the vague kind that came from people trying to do favors. She replied that she had capacity and would be glad to connect with the client. She met Elliot the following week, briefly, when he stopped by the studio to drop off some reference materials for the project. He was tall and quiet and looked at her studio the way a person looks at a space they understand, the way someone looks when they are reading the choices in the room and appreciating what they find. "You did this build-out," he said. "Every inch," she said. He nodded slowly. "The proportions are good. The light placement is exceptional." She thanked him. He left. It was a 10-minute interaction with someone who noticed the right things, and she thought about it twice during the rest of the afternoon, which was 2 times more than she had expected to. Harriet filed the counter-complaint on a Thursday. The documentation was thorough. The way all of Harriet's work was thorough. It included a timeline of the original project's financial records showing no irregularities, a record of the complaint's filing date and the information contained within it, and a formal request to the city to identify the filer of the anonymous complaint on grounds of professional interference. It also included one other item that Harriet had found during her review, the records of the accounting software login history. The access that had been used to pull the financial documentation cited in the complaint had occurred 6 weeks after the engagement ended. It had not been Renata's login. It had been the secondary credential she had since removed. She did not call this out directly in the filing. Harriet said it was more useful to let the city's review surface it. The review took 5 weeks. During those 5 weeks, Renata found an apartment. It was on the 3rd floor of a building in a neighborhood she had driven through a dozen times and always thought she could live in, with a library 2 blocks away and a good market nearby and streets that were wide enough to breathe on. The apartment had a 2nd bedroom that could be an office, and windows that faced east, and floors that were not perfect but were honest, the kind of floors that had age in them and did not try to pretend otherwise. She loved it immediately. The lease negotiation with Preston, handled by Harriet, took 2 weeks and went the way Harriet had said it would go. Preston agreed to an early exit arrangement with a modest fee that Renata paid because the clean exit was worth more to her than the money. She packed her share of the apartment on a Saturday in boxes that Noel helped carry, and she did not go back. The new apartment became hers quickly, the way spaces that are right for a person tend to become theirs. She put her furniture in it and hung her art and arranged her books and moved her work table to the window, and within a week it felt like somewhere she had always been going. Dottie came to see it on the 2nd weekend. She walked through every room without saying much, which was her way of paying attention. She stopped at the east-facing window in the living room and looked out at the street for a moment. "You're okay," she said. It was not a question. "I'm okay," Renata said. Dottie turned around. Her expression was the one she wore when she had been carrying something for a while and was ready to put it down. "I need you to know something. I liked Preston. I want you to know that because I don't want you to think I was rooting against you too. I know, Mama. I just needed you to see what I was seeing, and I didn't know if you were seeing it." "I was seeing it," Renata said. "I just wasn't ready to look at it head-on." Dottie nodded. She opened her arms and Renata walked into them, which was something she had been doing since she was small, and it still worked the same way, the way some things that are true early stay true all the way through. Commissioner Whitfield's office sent the review findings 7 weeks after the counter-complaint was filed. Harriet called Renata when the letter arrived. "The complaint has been dismissed," Harriet said. "No findings against Cole Design Studio. The review found that the original complaint was made using financial records that had been accessed without the business owner's knowledge or current authorization." Renata sat very still. "The filer is identified in the record," Harriet continued. "The name is not published publicly, but it is documented. If you want to pursue further action, you have grounds." "No," Renata said. She thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No, the business is clear. That's what matters." "Understood," Harriet said. She paused. "Renata, I want to say something that is outside my professional capacity." "Go ahead." "You handled this with a level of composure that I don't see often. I want you to know that." Renata looked at the east window of her new apartment. "I had a good attorney," she said. Harriet made a sound that might have been a laugh. The clearance letter arrived by mail 2 days later on official city letterhead. Renata framed it. She hung it in her office next to a print she had bought the year she launched the studio. It was not a showy thing. Nobody who came to the studio would know what it meant, but she knew what it had cost to earn it, and she wanted it where she could see it. 6 months after the wedding that had not happened, Renata's life looked like something she had built on purpose. Cole Design Studio had 4 active projects, the most they had ever carried at once. 2 were residential, 1 was a small commercial build-out, and 1 was a consulting engagement that Elliott Vance had referred to them directly after the home office renovation had gone well. The client on the consulting engagement was a nonprofit that was renovating a community center in the northeast part of the city, and the project had the kind of scope that could define a firm's reputation if it went right. Renata was making sure it went right. Noel had hired a part-time project coordinator named Yvette, which meant Renata was spending less time on scheduling and more time on the actual design work, which was where she was best. The studio was full in the way that good studios are full, not chaotic but occupied, always something drawing attention, always something that needed the particular kind of looking that was the core of the work. She had been talking to Elliott Vance, off and on, for 4 months. It had started as professional. The referral conversations, then a follow-up about the nonprofit project, then a question he had about a structural approach she had taken in a residential project that his firm was looking to reference. He was methodical about it, not in a cold way but in the way of someone who was thoughtful about how he moved through things and did not hurry. She liked that about him. They had lunch once, which had been professionally framed, and then coffee, which was less professionally framed, and then an afternoon walking through a neighborhood they both admired from a design perspective, which was not professionally framed at all, but neither of them said that out loud. He was easy to be around. He was interested in things. He asked questions and then actually listened to the answers, which was something Renata had once taken for granted and no longer did. She was not rushing anything. She was not, if she was honest, entirely sure what she was doing, but she was allowing herself to pay attention to someone who was worth paying attention to, and that felt right. The landmark contract bid had been Noel's idea. The city had put out a request for proposals for the renovation of a historic train depot in the center of the city, a building that had been sitting underutilized for a decade, while various plans for it failed to materialize. It was a significant project. The budget was real. The visibility was significant. Firms 3 times the size of Cole Design Studio had been talking about bidding. "We should bid," Noel said, on a Thursday morning in the studio when Yvette had gone to a site visit and it was just the two of them. Renata looked up from her screen. "We're not a big enough firm," she said. "We don't have to be the biggest firm," he said. "We have to have the best proposal. Read the RFP. They're looking for someone who understands adaptive reuse. That's not a large firm skill. That's a specific skill." She looked at him. He was right, which was something she was used to, and something she no longer resisted when she recognized it. "Okay," she said, "let's write the proposal." They spent 3 weeks on it. Renata did the design concept and the spatial narrative. Noel handled the project management framework and the budget justification. Elliot, when she mentioned the project over coffee one afternoon, offered to review the structural approach sections, which he had specific expertise in from a similar depot renovation his firm had done in Philadelphia. She let him. His notes were precise and useful and did not change the concept, only strengthened its technical grounding. They submitted the proposal on a Tuesday morning. Renata went back to the studio and worked on the community center project because there was always more work to do, and because waiting was not something she was good at, and the best antidote to waiting was more work. Preston called on a Sunday in October. Renata was in her apartment when the call came. She was at the east window with coffee and a book, and the particular Sunday morning quiet that she had come to love, the kind of quiet that belonged to her completely because there was no one else in it. She looked at the phone, she looked at his name. She picked up. "Hi, Preston," she said. "Hi," he sounded like himself, which was to say he sounded a little rehearsed and a little uncertain underneath the rehearsed. "I wasn't sure you'd answer." "I almost didn't." "I understand." He paused. "I've been thinking about what to say for about 3 months now, and I still don't know if I have it right, but I wanted you to hear it anyway." She waited. "I let my mother do things I should have stopped," he said. "Not just the 4 days. Before that too, in ways I was choosing not to look at. I've been thinking about why I did that, and I think it was because I didn't want to have a hard conversation with her, and it was easier to trust that you would just absorb it. That was not fair to you." She was quiet. "She went back to Connecticut the day after you called me," he said. "She and I have had some hard conversations. She didn't receive them well, but we had them." "I'm glad," Renata said, and she meant it genuinely with no sharpness in it. "I'm not calling to ask you to reconsider," he said. "I know that door is closed. I just wanted you to know that I heard what you said. It took me a while to hear it, but I heard it." "Thank you, Preston." "How are you, the business? I heard you're doing well." "The business is good," she said. "I'm good." "Good," he said. He sounded like he meant it, which made her feel something soft and final for him, the kind of feeling that was not love anymore but was not nothing either. "Take care of yourself, Renata." "You too," she said. She ended the call and put the phone face down on the windowsill and looked out at the street. A couple was walking a dog below. A kid on a bicycle went past in a green jacket. She sat with it. The conversation. Preston's voice. The thing he had finally understood and said out loud, which she had needed to hear less than she would have thought, because she had already moved past the place where hearing it would have changed anything. She was glad he had grown enough to say it. She was also glad she was in this apartment, in this life, which was quieter and steadier and more fully hers than anything in the 14 months before the wedding had felt. She picked up her book. She read for an hour. Then her phone rang again. The number was a city area code she did not recognize. She answered it. "Is this Renata Cole?" The voice on the other end was a woman, professional, brisk. "It is," she said. "This is the office of the City Procurement Commissioner. I'm calling to inform you that Cole Design Studio has been selected as the lead firm for the Depot Civic Renewal Project. Congratulations, Ms. Cole. We'd like to schedule a kickoff meeting with your team at your earliest convenience." Renata put the phone down on the windowsill. She looked at the street below. She pressed both palms flat on the windowsill and looked out at the city and felt the specific weight of the moment, the weight of something that had been worked toward for a long time finally arriving. She picked the phone back up. "Yes," she said, "we would be glad to schedule that meeting." She called Noel the moment she was off the phone. He picked up on the first ring. "We got it," she said. The sound he made was not a word exactly. It was the sound of someone who had believed in something for a long time and was now allowed to say so. She called her mother next. Dottie cried a little, which she almost never did, and pretended she was not crying, which Renata pretended to believe. She texted Elliot 2 words, "We got it." He replied in 60 seconds, "Knew you would. Dinner to celebrate." She smiled at the phone. She typed back, "Yes." The studio opening happened on a Friday evening in early December. Cole Design Studio had moved into the new space 6 weeks prior, a larger, ground-floor commercial unit 4 blocks from the original location, with exposed brick and 12-foot ceilings, and a conference room with a glass wall and natural light that came from 3 directions. Renata had designed the build-out herself, which Noel said was deeply on-brand, and which she agreed was entirely fair. The space was, she thought, the best thing she had ever designed, not because it was the most technically complex or the most expensive, because it was honest, because every choice in it reflected something true about what the firm was and what it was becoming. They had hung the clearance letter in the back office, where Renata and Noel could both see it. They had hung the depot project timeline on the main wall, because the depot was the largest project the firm had ever taken on, and they wanted to live with the scope of it in their eyeline every day. They had arranged the studio so that it felt like a place where real work happened, not a showroom, and Renata had insisted on a small seating area near the front, where clients could sit and look at reference materials without feeling like they were in a waiting room. By 6:30, the space was full. Clients came. City officials came. 2 firms that had referred projects to Cole Design Studio sent principals. Yvette brought her husband, who stood by the food table and looked genuinely happy to be there. People who had been with Renata in some form through the past year were in the room, and people who had known her for a decade, and people who were just starting to know who she was. Dottie was there. She had come down from Baltimore on the train and was wearing a deep green blazer and looked like a woman who had every right to be proud and was not hiding it. She walked through the space carefully when she arrived, the same way she had walked through the apartment, paying attention, reading the choices. "You did good," she said to Renata. "We did good," Renata said, and nodded at Noel, who was across the room explaining something to a client with the kind of enthusiasm he brought to things he actually cared about. Dottie looked at her daughter. She reached up and put one hand against Renata's cheek for a moment, which was not something she did often, and which meant more because of that. "I know," Dottie said, "but I'm talking about you." Noel gave a short speech at 7, which was funny and warm and managed to be both without being either excessively. He thanked Renata by name and said, without overselling it, that Cole Design Studio existed because of her clarity of vision, and that the past year had proven that clarity held up under conditions that would have broken something less well-made. People applauded. Renata stood at the edge of the room in a royal blue dress, her hair pinned up in a clean, precise style, and let herself feel it. Not just the applause, all of it. The year, the morning with the suitcases, the phone call in the wedding dress, the apartment she had loved immediately, the clearance letter in the frame, The Sunday morning when the phone rang with a city area code she did not recognize. She let herself feel all of it at once, which she had not let herself do before because there had always been a next thing to move toward, and standing still long enough to feel the full weight of the year had not been something she could afford until now. It was heavy. It was also in the way that things you have earned tend to be exactly right. Elliot found her near the end of the evening, when the room had thinned to the people who were staying because they wanted to, and not because they felt they should. He handed her a glass of sparkling water and stood beside her, looking at the depot timeline on the main wall. "It's a good space," he said. "It's a great space," she said. He smiled at that. Not the polished smile of someone performing charm, but the real kind, the kind that moved through his whole face and did not apologize for existing. "What's the first thing you're going to do when the depot project launches?" he said. She thought about it. "Walk through it," she said. "The whole building, before the contractors get in, before any of the design decisions have been touched. I want to know it the way it is before I change it." He nodded. "That's the right approach." "I know," she said. They stood in comfortable quiet for a moment, looking at the room, looking at what she had built. Dottie was in the corner talking to Yvette with the ease of two people who had just decided to be friends. Noel was near the door saying goodbye to the last of the clients with the warmth he always brought to endings. It was a good room. It was her room. Elliot turned to look at her. "I have a question," he said. "Ask it," she said. "There's a building in the west side that I've been looking at for a consulting project. I think you'd want to see it. It has the same adaptive reuse potential as the depot, smaller scale, but interesting bones. Would you want to come look at it with me next week?" She looked at him. He was asking, she understood, about more than the building. And he was asking in the way he did everything, without rushing it, without demanding an answer she had not thought through, without needing her to be something other than exactly what she was. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." He nodded. He lifted his glass slightly. "To what's next?" he said. She lifted hers. "To what's next?" she said. They drank. Dottie, from across the room, caught Renata's eye. Renata gave her a small nod. Dottie smiled. She turned back to her conversation. It was a Friday evening in December. The city outside the studio windows was lit up and moving. The depot project timeline was on the wall. The clearance letter was in its frame in the back office. The lease on this space had Renata's name on it and Noel's and no one else's. Renata stood in the room she had designed and held her glass and felt, for the first time in a long time, the specific weight of a life that was exactly what she had made it. It was hers. All of it.